Thank you, Laura, and thanks to everyone here at the Hill Center for having us back for a remarkable 6th season of Life of a Poet. Of course, also thanks to the amazing, wonderful, mind-blowing Ron Charles and the Washington Post for their continued support of this series.
Supposed to lower expectations.
So I wrote a blog post today about this event and this series at the library's literary blog from the Capitol Seat, Poetry and Literature at the Library of Congress. And I talked about how magical this series is. What I said is that the next 75 minutes or so will be so moving and thought-provoking, will surprise us and focus us, and will ultimately show us how language can contend with our world in the most powerful and meaningful ways you can imagine. So you better do that, Ron.
It's really up to Carmen.
Before I begin, though, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Poetry and Literature Center at the Library of Congress. We are home to the U.S. Poet Laureate, and our new laureate, Joy Harjo, will give her opening reading at our Thomas Jefferson building just down the street on Thursday, September 19th. I'm sad to say that yesterday we maxed out on registration for the event, but if you haven't already registered, we'll have a rush line, so you should show up and be there and get in and at the very least be in our overflow room and be part of the wonderful, exciting, momentous, historic occasion that is Joy Harjo's opening reading. To find out more about our events, to sign up for the blog I just talked about, or to help support us as part of our new Poet Laureate Circle, you can visit our website, loc.gov/poetry. You should also have surveys on your seat, and we'd love to have you fill out those surveys and let us know what you think about tonight's event. We use those for our future programming, so please do so, and you can hand them to me or leave them on your seat after the event. Tonight's featured poet is Carmen Giménez Smith, and I can't imagine a better way to kick off the library's fall literary programming than by hearing she and Ron talk about her work. I've known Carmen and her work for over a decade when we published her in my literary magazine, Jubilant. We were just talking about how great that was, how exciting it was to have her imprint in the magazine. And what I wanted to say formally is that when I think of poets I learned about through the magazine, Carmen is tops. I've eagerly read her poetry collections, and I'm excited that her 7th Be Recorder is just out and available for purchase tonight, thanks to East City Bookshop. And it's, as Laura said, right out there. The Library of Congress has had the great good fortune to feature Carmen in a 2016 panel, Poetry Publishing and Race, and I encourage you to check out the webcast at loc.gov. But this event will be something special, and it has been many years in the making, too. I want to give special thanks to Letras Latinas, the Literary Institute at the University of Notre Dame's Institute for Latino Studies, for their support of this Life of a Poet event and of Hispanic poetry, Hispanic programming at the Library of Congress in general. And in fact, I forget how many years back you participated in a recording for the Hispanic Division's Archive of Hispanic Literature on tape. That's also worth checking out online at loc.gov. If you want to find out more about Letras Latinas and the Institute, you can visit latinostudies.nd.edu. And now Carmen. Carmen Giménez Smith was born in New York and currently lives in Blacksburg, Virginia, where she is a professor of English at Virginia Tech. Her other collections of poetry include Milk and Filth, a finalist for the 2013 National Book Critics Circle Award, and Goodbye Flicker, winner of the 2012 Juniper Prize for Poetry. She is also the author of the memoir, Bring Down the Little Birds, on Mothering, Art, Work, and Everything Else, winner of the 2011 American Book Award. And she's co-editor of Angels of the Americalypse, new Latino writing published in 2014. The publisher of Naomi Press, Giménez Smith is also a poetry editor of The Nation with Stephanie Burt, and a co-director of Canto Mundo, a national organization that cultivates a community of Latinx poets through workshops, symposia, and public readings. Please join me in welcoming her to Capitol Hill and the Hill Center.
I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to have you here. And congratulations on your new book. which is wonderful. Highly recommended to all of you. We're using a new sound system tonight, which is about as convenient as dancing in suits of armor, but I will do my best. So raise your hand if you can't hear me. In the first lines of your first poem of your new collection, Be Recorder, you write, people sometimes confuse me for someone else they know because they projected an idea onto me. What is this idea they've projected onto you?
I think part of what I am interested in thinking about race and identity is that personally we have, people of color have lots of different experiences and their internal questions about who they are, but oftentimes we're defined by who other people think we are. And so my sense of how I'm perceived is just as a kind of a generic brown body. And, you know, the idea that, or like kind of a replaceable body. And I guess some ways that you see that enacted is in the idea of like, well, we need a Latina poet. Who do we have, as opposed to thinking about who's writing great poems? Oh, let's invite that person.
So that surprises me. You start there with liberals.
Well, I think one of the other influences in my work is, I guess it's rap, and I think about it as in the tradition of the troubadour, or say something like the ghazal, in which the poet kind of puts themselves as the interlocutor of the book. And my sense of that was I wanted to set the tone, and I wanted to, part of the poem's idea is reclamation of my subjectivity and in this particular way, and that is that I'm not a generic face, and I've worked really hard to work against those assumptions. Nobody
is, right?
Nobody is, but I think so you have someone like Trump talking about the Bahamas and saying that there are thugs and criminals. That's just code, right? Yes. Like he's sort of doing this blanket. He's not, I think there's a way in which we all do that, including the most liberal of us, the most seemingly woke of us. We still have a lot of work to do to think about how we identify with each other and how we can move away from using the immediate markers, and this is the utopian version of life, and see human beings and for all the things they are. But I think that poem is also informed by, revenge. This professor that I had who confused me for years, it wasn't like a one-time thing, it was several times who confused me with another woman of color. Part of it is like, fuck you, here I am, now you should know who I am.
Read that poem for us, please.
Origins. People sometimes confuse me for someone else they know because they've projected an idea onto me. I've developed a second sense for this. Some call it paranoia, but I call it the profoundest consciousness on the face of the earth. This gift was passed on to me from my mother, who learned it from solid and socially constructed doors whooshing inches from her face. It may seem like a lie to anyone who has not felt the whoosh, but a door swinging inches from your face is no joke. It feels like being invisible, which is also what it feels like when someone looks at your face and thinks you're someone else. In graduate school, a teacher called me by another woman's name with not even brown skin, but what you might call a brown name. That sting took years to overcome, but I got over it, and here I am with a name that's at the front of this object, a name I've made singular that I spent my whole life making.
So much of your life and work are compressed in that poem.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Really. Your fight against racism, the respect for your mother, your struggle and success as a poet. Here I am with a name that's at the front of this object, your book, a name I've made singular that I've spent my whole life making, and that's what I want to talk to you about tonight, is the life you've made,
Okay.
you spent making. In one of your poems you write, I grew up on the edge of your electrified fence like a weed. Puts us in our place, puts you in your place.
Yeah.
That childhood is why I'm a poet. Tell us about that childhood.
Wow. Where shall I begin? There's so many interesting factors that I think if you come from a lower middle class or working class background, that are the small miracles that get you to a place in which you have, I don't know, access. And my father, for all his faults, was a voracious reader and had all sorts of books in the house. A lot of them were for like business management or self-help. I read them all. I had no filter. I just read everything, and I got into the habit of I would go to garage sales, which is garage sales and flea markets where I bought a lot of my books. So it was a lot of like middle-aged ladies, a lot of Danielle Steele, a lot of historical novels. So it was a very like self-put-together experience. But it was also very difficult childhood, and a lot of it, I think the difficulties came from the challenges of my father, his desire for assimilation, and the reality of what assimilation would look like. And his sense of assimilation was just a natural progression into success. I mean, kind of being brainwashed by the American dream. But the fallout for my family, for his dreams, the fallout always landed in our laps. So we moved around a lot, and we had like this weird phone thing when phone collectors would call. So if family would call, they would call twice, and then they would call, let it ring twice, and then hang up, and then they would call again. So it was just like this sense of like.
So you knew it wasn't a bill collector.
So we knew it wasn't a bill collector. So that's the code. So just the sense of like wanting the American dream, but also being up against like the reality that it wasn't happening. It wasn't going to happen for us. But looking out onto the landscape and feeling like the story seems that it's happening to everybody else.
Yeah. TV magazines. They all
TV
make it seem that way.
magazines, the mythology, yeah. And so I think that I became, because of the reading and because of how I was experiencing the world, I developed a really complex interior life that was fantastical. And the book, Goodbye Flicker, is actually a chronicle of a lot of that magical world that I created that was very much based in fairy tales and that kind of stuff. But I guess the miraculous thing that happened along the way was that I was able to cultivate an aesthetic subjectivity, in a way, in spite of my childhood, that I developed kind of first on my own in an autodidact way, and I never quite lost that autodidact impulse.
Interesting.
Yeah.
In a poem called Sleep as Deep as Coma, it ends with these lines. When I was a girl, I collected reams of paper, smoothed by the white over and over, the hope of starting from blank. I hoped to endure being well enough to conjure a new bright vessel because I wanted to live. So you were going to write yourself into being.
Yeah, and I think also mental illness, writing gave me a way of processing what seems amorphous. I think when we think of anxiety, one of the things that you're asked, like when you have anxiety, is to really just concentrate on what it is that you're feeling anxious and parse out like what it really is as opposed to what you think it is. Right. And I think the notion of having a subjectivity and the particularly private subjectivity that comes when you're in communion with a poem, because when you're writing and revising a poem, I think you're moving through lots of stages of consciousness and relation with who you are, and certain stages of revision require emptying oneself of the self, and then other ones require using the self as I guess, as the paint of the poem.
I love to think about the family you describe in which that's taking place, which is very different than than you.
Yes, I was in a fantasy world. I wasn't
Yes.
ever 100% present. I think it was a difficult childhood with abuse and lots of other factors. So it did cause me to retreat much farther into my sort of disassociated world. But the advantage to that was that when you have a disassociated world, you just have to do a lot of work to keep it going. And so I learned just kind of by being a daydreamer that was kind of a controlling, like a, kind of like a Alfred Hitchcock. You know, he was like notoriously a controlling, awful director. I sort of felt that way, kind of tyrannical about the world that I would create. And sometimes I would, be angry with myself, the director, of like, that shouldn't have happened. And so I would have to kind of go back. So it was it taught me a lot about the structure of story and the structure of imagery, yeah.
Because it doesn't sound like you were being left alone in your room.
I was being left alone a lot,
Were you?
but, then sometimes I wasn't.
I want you to read this wonderful poem, Our Voices Occupy Rooms,
Yes,
about the women in your life.
yeah. And this is actually a poem that's set in D.C.
Oh,
Yeah. Oh, it's right there. Our voices occupy rooms. We were a family of women big on art. Not the kind gotten from travel, thick papered books, or the didactic analysis of a period in a classroom, but rather the kind garnered from gaping at a painting, goose-skinned with awe. Well into my years, I feel it in my body, activated samely by the woman in my family doing their cumbia, and when the goosebumps came in the museums, my mother urging us to get right into the paintings' faces, I'd remark loudly on the French parliaments, the rosy cheeks, although my mother was most likely standing near the Dutch milkmaids. And she would call back, "Yes, wow!" We joke about volume in our family, my sister's husky, raucous laugh, my aunt's melodic squeal, my mother's operatic sneeze, all freight train loud. I take large gulps of air to fuel my oration. I worry terminally that people notice, knowing that people notice, and so hoping that people realize there is not little that I can do to change it. My friend Aida, beautiful in a 40s Varga way, has a voice that booms like smoky electricity, an eel. She's brown too, but that suggests, look at those people with their ways, their food, like when people assume I like spicy food. I don't. Yet some native attributes are deep wells of pleasure. In museums, my mother would call out to me over the gallery's benumbed solemnity in her familiar animal call, "Lisi, mira esto," which like a scent gave me a scent to tingle in this most public place.
I love the tension in that poem between your pride in your family and the way they embarrass you.
Yes.
Your pride in your culture and the sense that you're always being slotted into it.
Yeah.
Those two things are not resolved in that poem.
No.
You love those people and they annoy you.
Yeah. What's interesting about what the backdrop of that poem is, and I think again it's like one of those small factors that take me from like having been like, an office manager or a marketing executive or a wife or a nurse, but that my mom, who had a high school education, came to this country, was a waitress most of my childhood, well into high school, was like, we live in this amazing country with all these museums. Like, I don't know anything about art, but let's go to the museums, know?
Yes.
And so she would take us, and that was our experience. Like, it wasn't like she hadn't, she would talk about what she saw, but she wasn't like she was an art historian. Like, now I take my kids and I'm like, well, that's Robert Rosh, like that, it's kind of boring, but there was just something about the awe that she also gave to us, and I guess modeled. So I was so hungry and I knew nothing about art, and that actually was an advantage because then I could do whatever I wanted with that art. And those those experiences are so key to how I became an artist.
I love her enthusiasm in that poem. She's the only one yelling out. She's probably the only one really enjoying it,
Yes,
frankly.
that's right, yeah.
The numbing solemnity, is that what you refer
Yeah.
to it as? Yeah, I mean, she's really doing what the museum hoped would happen.
Exactly.
She's being moved by the art.
Yeah, yeah.
There is a fascinating and really deeply troubling conflict throughout your poems between patriotism and the fight against racism. Your parents went through it, now you go through it. I wonder if you'd read a section of Be Recorder that begins, I became American each time. It's at tab 3. This is a much longer poem, but I'm just having her read certain sections of it.
I became American each time my parents became American, each instance symbolizing a different version of being American. First is when they decided to stay, and next is the photo of my parents beaming by a judge with citizenship in their hand. Also the photo of my mother and father in the 60s looking like any American, perhaps foreign only in tongue. The Statue of Liberty behind them. Or the first time they've registered as American by having an American job. Though I was born in America, I wasn't born American. I know it's hard to understand, but it's also not hard. I became American when I memorized the national anthem, or when I had sex with a white boy, or when I thought my first racist thought, or when I decided I wanted to always live in a place like US, which is how America becomes an event that happens only for the lucky. So the question, where are you from, means I was born foreign in America, but not their America. I mean the chain of lands called America, connected by chains of mountains where minute threads of the first people who lived that America live in me, when there was the earth giving only over what she wanted. That was before she became American.
That poem speaks so directly to the last 2-3 years. Not to limit it historically, but obviously it took you much longer to think that through, but it speaks so much to our heightened racism, tension about immigrants, all those issues. Talk to us about that awkwardness of being American and suddenly not American, and how deeply irritating that is.
Mm-hmm. There are a couple of ways that I feel American and not American. And I think when you come, my mom was she's Peruvian, and she was just so enamored and idealized this history and taught me all about the Incan culture and the Incan mythology. So there is still a part of me that feels a link to Peru that's very tenuous, but it still informs a lot of who I am. When you grow up around immigrant parents, you can have different experiences. My dad, who all my life worshiped Donald Trump, like back in the 80s was obsessed with Donald Trump. I mean, I think that's one thing that we forget is Donald Trump has a fan base that extends back into the 80s. And my dad was so certain that he could be successful because we lived in this country. And, I think part of what we all have Stockholm syndrome, right? Like we live in this country and we've been totally brainwashed to act against, I think all of us in some respects are brainwashed to act against our own best interests in the anticipation of some enactment of the American dream, which changes forms, but everybody thinks they're an exception to the rule of that. And in a way, that is the part of our Stockholm syndrome, because there's a finite amount of resources, there's a finite amount of money, and in order for people to be successful, it has to be on the backs of other people. And I mean, like I said, my mom was a waitress. She cleaned houses, she cleaned hotels. I saw her body being pushed down, so there was my father, who had this really idealistic and was going to be rich and was an inventor, just kind of, but never was able to do anything. And there was my mother, who always had 3 jobs. She tells me this story when she like pulled into a parking lot and she didn't know where she was supposed to be. And the reality of, in order to even just have a basic existence, that my mom would have to do this kind of labor that even at an early age, I was like kind of skeptical. You know, I was like, is this really what's happening? And, you know, the experience of racism, when I was in high school, it was such a kind of, I mean, in retrospect, kind of funny. There was a young man, I grew up in San Jose, California. There was a young man who had a locker above me, and one time we were both taking stuff out, and he was like, "Why don't you get back on the boat?" And I was like, "Dude, that's the wrong, you're wrong, wrong racist comment." I need to get, you know, I need to go back through the river. That's what you want to say, right? Like,
Well, you're from New York.
My parents came from on a plane, by the way, but you know.
Yeah, and
So,
you were born in New York?
I was born in,
So
yeah, but it
get
was,
back
it
on a
had,
bus, I
it
mean-
had nothing to do with
No.
who I was. Like, it was a moment of clarity. I was like, he just doesn't like me because I'm not white. Like, it doesn't matter that I didn't come on a boat or whatever other kinds of racist things that people think. It was that I wasn't like him.
Right.
And so I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be a thing.
You write about work so well and so viscerally. I wonder if you'd read a section of Be Recorded that begins, "They work their fingers to the soul." That's tab number 5.
Okay. So this poem is based on Pedro Pietri's Puerto Rican Obituary. So I just kind of did a riff on it. It took a long time because, well, anyway, it took a long time. After Pedro Pietri's Puerto Rican Obituary. They work their fingers to the soul, their bones to their marrow. They toil in blankness inside the dead yellow rectangle of warehouse windows. Work fingers to knots of fire, the young, the ancients, the boneless, the broken. The warehouse does too to the bone of the good bones of the building, every splinter spoken for. She works to the centrifuge of time, the calendar a thorn into the soul dollar of working without pause. Work their mortal coils into frayed threads until just tatter. They worked their bones to the soul until there was no soul left to send. Worked until they were dead, gone to heaven or back home. For the dream to have USA without USA, to export USA to the parts under the leather sole of the boss. They work in dreams of working under less than ideal conditions instead of just not ideal conditions. Work for the shrinking pension and never dental, for the illusion of the doctor medicating them for work-related disease until they die, leaving no empire, only more dreams that their babies should work less, who instead work more for less. So they continue to work for them and their kin. They work balloon payment in the form of a heart attack. If only that'll be me someday, the hopeless worker said on the 13th of never, hollering into the canyon of perpetual time. 4 bankruptcies later, 3/5 into a life that she had planned on expecting happiness in any form it took, excluding the knock-off cubed life she lived in debt, working to the millionth of the cent her body cost the machine's owner. Yolanda, Berta, Zoila, Chabela, Lucia Esperanza, Naya, Carmela, Celia, Rocio once worked here. Their work disappearing into dream-emptied pockets into the landfill of work, the work to make their bodies into love for our own.
Thank you. I'm reading a novel now by Ta-Nehisi Coates that comes out in a few weeks, and he talks about the way the plantation was set up so that the plantation family never had to see anyone working.
Interesting.
And everything was done so that this would take place. They never saw the slaves working. Even in their own house, it was all invisible. And it strikes me, you're writing 100 years later, 120, 150 years later, 200 years later, we're doing the same thing. So much of the labor in our lives is invisible. The whole internet, the way we order things and they just appear at the door.
Yeah.
Thousands, millions of people are toiling away in dead-end jobs, crushing jobs, soul-crushing jobs. and we never have any contact with them at all. We don't go to the mall, we don't go to the grocery store, we don't see these people anymore. The invisibility of manual labor.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, to me, I guess seeing my mom and my dad worked a lot too, seeing them work so much, I only know how to work in a way. Like the challenge of growing up with immigrant parents is sometimes and it's meant well, but they're only teaching you how to survive. And so I think that's why I think about work as kind of a primal, and also because without work, you can't have money. And money is the only thing that matters in this country. It matters more than anything else. It matters more than bodies. It matters more than states. It matters more than cities. And so there's such a small number of folks that have a lot of money, but there's a way in which I've been thinking recently about like, well, what would be something really super revolutionary to do? And a thought, and I'm not an economist, is just like nobody buy anything. Like just stop buying things. We just like exchange things with one another, what we need, because the fact is we don't.
Most of us.
Nobody needs more stuff. No. But of course, then that directly affects the working folks who would lose their jobs.
Yes.
So we're in this kind of codependency with capitalism, and capitalism is a sociopath. So you know what I mean? Like it's not going to work out for anybody.
But your poem is radical in that it makes us see that in a way that we've gotten used to not seeing or comfortable not
Right.
acknowledging.
Right.
You've got another poem called The Hungry Office.
Yeah, so this is
Very, very directly to this sort of office work you were talking about.
kind of a Robert Hayden, that poem I love. It resonated so much. When I read it, I was like, oh my God, I didn't know that poems could be about that. Hungry Office. Owl Girl always bore shame for mother's brown grease uniform. Mother told her that entire cities really got managed by cleaning ladies coming in night after night to correct executive mishap in the moonlight. Mops set aside for calculators, they formulate commerce. The only lady to know European markets writes her equations into contracts. 7-armed document maker, the bedrock floor by floor. It was an ending like she likes. How maids feel when they elbow through the vacuum dust to distribute their wealth over miles of cyclone fence. That their transport will come. All our mothers' blank faces answering doors in movies.
To me, that poem was so revelatory in that it made me think about this whole army of people that are toiling away at night, literally at night, and that we're not even aware of.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess now what's been interesting too is because we're recording all aspects of our lives, that there's this entire subculture of folks who make videos of themselves humiliating or abusing marginalized folks. So you get people kicking homeless people or messing with people at stores who they're just like, I just want to do my job and earn my $9 an hour before I go to my other job, you know. So I think it's not just that we don't see them, but part of how capitalism is able to perpetuate itself is that we don't only see them, but that we also feel a little bit of contempt, because the contempt protects us from the reality that we're 3 minutes away, potentially, from being in that same position.
You have a poem called In Remembrance of Their Labors.
It's in this
you got
one.
that?
Yeah, it's in this one. The whole thing?
Just the first page.
Okay, sure. Let's see.
Tab 7.
Tab 7, okay, thank you. Oh, there it is, okay. In remembrance of their labors. What is the nature of the brown artist's desire for disruption? My legacy, a long lineage of fuck-up hustlers, mostly on my father's side. On my mother's side, civil servants, 3 generations of accountants for the state. On my father's, scamps, scam artists, pimps, criminals, perfect models for destabilization. From all sides, studious and intense labor, relentless work, under the table exchange. I'm a node of various dark and light powers, first generation, emitting energy from the first world. In remembrance of their labors, honest and corrupt, I infiltrate the creative class by squatting in its traditions. This in remembrance of my impetuous mother and father's jet plane ride into the 60s maelstrom and bussing tables in a tiny apartment in the Bronx and knowing only the English words for all things restaurant. I serve thee, for thine labor is my staircase. The frivolity of poetry, layers of frivolity disguised as labor, or vice versa. Poetry is useless until we rot from inside when we don't have words. Emancipatory lyric poetry, deregulated lyric poetry with work boots, the lyric poetry of garbage, of kitsch, of Marianism, of cockroach and placenta and dirty fingernails. In remembrance of their very deep need and hand-gnarling labors, I declare the ocean Latinx, its blue surface, the tongue of our abuelas, forming the rough syllables of our Americanized ideals. In remembrance of my father's belief in text, the house filled with books of striving, I devour the argot of the oppressor, and U.S. opened me in how to win friends and influence people. My favorite story was about a boy who befriended a czar, who then married the boy's mother. It told me there would be a game. This is in remembrance of my mother, whose hands were calloused against heat, biceps bulging from hauling vacuum cleaners and trays of grand slams. Mercy to my failures and the legacy of failures beneath the surface of the heroic immigrant story I wish I was telling.
That poem does so many things. I want to talk about this movement from work to poetry. You say, in remembrance of their labors, honest and corrupt, I infiltrate the creative class by squatting in its traditions. So you're suggesting that poetry for you is a kind of spy craft, a secret invasion, a transgression as protest. In another poem you say, I'd like what I write to reach into the center of the pastoral and throttle it. What are you demanding that poetry do?
You know, the world is so different from the time that I was young, and I've seen an interesting elision of Gen X as a subject of consideration, as a generation, as an aesthetic movement, because we kind of went from boomers to millennials. In fact, I saw an ad for a book, and it said, this book will speak to boomers and millennials alike. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess it won't speak to me, you know. So, and we serve as this kind of bridge culture. The beginning of, I guess, in my college experience was the hope of multiculturalism, because there was a moment in the early to mid 90s where people were like, this could happen. We could have a world that could look more like the world. And I believed in that until I went to graduate school.
How can that be? That must have been the most liberal place on earth, wasn't it?
Nope.
Where'd you go?
I went to Iowa. And up until that point,
You mean the Iowa
Writers
Workshop?
Yeah. So while I was there, when I went to grad school, my definition of being rich was you had a swimming pool in your backyard. I was like, those people are rich. But when I went to grad school, there were a lot of really wealthy people, and I was like, oh, they're assholes. You know, like there's a way in which being really super wealthy just kind of gave folks a sense of entitlement, and I had never seen entitlement in such a kind of, and I got it. And I did. The professor that I'm talking about did always confuse me. I think she was doing it on purpose, too.
Wow.
I think she was doing it in a racist way. But it was also like who had attention. There was like there were like 100 students,
Yes.
but there were like
And
five
it's
of us.
incredibly competitive to get in.
Yes. There were 5 of us who were a group of folks of color, and we were so marginalized.
There were 5 out of 100?
Well, there were probably 2 other ones, but they were like, they're like, we don't know you.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess my sense of like belonging and not belonging was formed by that, and my sense of class, and because so much of my childhood had been related to having class aspiration to wealth, it was a moment of realizing, like, even if I had enormous wealth, it wouldn't change how I'm read and what the expectations of what my work could do. And the expectations at the time were based on Gary Soto, like that's it, Gary Soto and Sandra Cisneros. Anything else most people at the program hadn't even read those poets.
Right.
So it was an inculcation that I accepted because I was young and I wanted to be part of it. But it was also a moment of like, I don't belong, and this isn't my world, so I'm going to have to figure out how to build my own world to then like infiltrate this world and make spaces for people who will come after me,
Right.
who need those spaces.
Right. And it begins with pointing out that there's a problem here.
Exactly, yeah.
What do you mean when you say I love this line. Poetry is useless until we rot from inside when we don't have words. So it comes from a kind of desperation.
Yeah. Poetry I'm teaching undergraduates right now poetry, and one of the challenges really is teaching them the attention that poetry requires, because once they're reading them with that level of attention, it resonates so much and allows them access to their interiority. We live so much in exteriority. We document our exteriority 500 times a day with Instagram and this and that and this. And our visits into our interiority are fleeting, because what we want to do is go in, get something pithy and smart, and then say it about ourselves, as opposed to just really inhabiting our interior life and seeing all of the contradictions. In the poem about becoming American, I was thinking of all of the ways that I imagined being American, and I mentioned having my first racist thought because I think part of, I think immigrants have a lot of all kinds of racist and colorist problems. One of the reasons, though, I think people who are immigrants participate is it's because what white supremacy does, right? And I was interested in like asking myself the questions of like, why do you believe that? And why do you believe this? And poetry has so often been a vehicle for me to open up to those questions being asked from all sorts of poets. It's not like I don't find great, despite how awfully racist he was, it's not like I don't find resonance in someone like Wallace Stevens, but my goal is to take what he does and deploy it through a marginalized voice. And so in that way, too, I think poetry is an artifact that when I was young, younger, when I was in college, the first book by a Latina that I ever read was by Lorna Di Cervantes. It was Emplumada. And I remember physically the room that I was in. I was in a class. It was a survey of like 19th century or 18th century American literature. So I was out. And I was in the class, like doing whatever. And I had the book because it had been assigned. And it was set in San Jose, which is where I went to high school and college. And I was reading it, and I was like, oh my God, she's talking to me. She's talking to me. Like, this is the first time that I felt someone talking to me, talking about the place I live, talking about my experience. And it kind of clicked for me, like, that's what you do, is you're writing for the person who needs the book.
Right.
So when I'm writing poetry and when I'm thinking about what poems should be, and then when my students are writing, I'm like, well, who needs this poem? Who needs this book?
needs it?
What do they need it for?
That's great.
Like, what is the gift of the book? You know, because the Emplumada was a game changer for me. Without that book, I would have a different trajectory. And so that's how I think about what poetry can do.
You also have this lovely definition of what poetry does. You write, I wish we were layers we could unfurl as object lesson. Maybe that's what a poem is. Just to open ourselves up to one another.
Yeah.
Really. You write very candidly about the demands and challenges of being a poet. My history with writing is a history of failure, you write. If only I wrote about robots. If only my schooling had been more useful. But I don't give a shit about robots. Instead, I'm caught up with the lyric, that working class bauble anyone can foment. I don't think that's true, by the way, but we need these people need to stand up and then sit down. Stand up and then sit down. Can you all hear us? Is it all right? I'm slowly getting used to this. Okay, sit down. It wasn't a real intermission. It's just a stand up, sit down. I want to talk about feminism,
Sure.
which is not a dirty word for you.
No.
No. This is an alarming trend among young women. Oh, I'm not a feminist. I hear these women telling me, I don't know what they're thinking. In a poem called Parts of an Autobiography, you write about learning about feminism from a capri-panted rebel who introduced you to Our Bodies, Ourselves in your first women's studies class. Feminism seemed like a miracle, you say. Tell us about that moment, or that era of your life.
I'll tell
Because
you.
your mother was working. I mean,
My mother
you
was
had good
working.
models of women,
Absolutely.
but you just needed the theory?
My mother was working, but it was deferential to patriarchy. She
Okay.
worked and then she worked. Like
Okay.
she came home and she continued to work. It wasn't like it was a partnership of,
Okay.
sharing resources. I grew up also in which the men would talk in one room and the women would talk. And I was such a perverse child. I would just go plot myself with the men and start talking until one of the uncles were like, get her out of here, So I was, and I think also there was it's so complicated, but like the continuum of gender in my family, I was not feminine. I didn't quite fit, and so I felt very much in this kind of middle world.
So when you got to school and you got this book and you took this women's studies class, it sort of gave you the language for things you had been feeling? Is
Yeah,
that
I mean,
close?
I when I was in high school, I was like, I didn't really know what that meant, but I knew that I felt equal to boys.
Right.
And and I thought actually they're in high school, they're kind of stupid. I know more, I know how to do things more. The fact that they have all of this cultural capital in this high school doesn't make sense to me because there's no there there. That's what I thought in high school.
Yeah.
And I think also the ways in which my mom acted in resistance to how her sisters or other women in our community, by having 2 or 3 jobs, by divorcing my dad because she got fed up, with his financial stuff, and just being able to build a financial life on her own.
Right.
She worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week doing it, but it was an act of feminism.
Yes.
Because and her desire to speak English and to really learn how to speak English, which I have aunts who don't speak English even though they live in this country for 30 years. All of those to me had this wow, she's really defying this stuff. But it was conceptual, right? And then I go into college, and I have to tell this one funny story really quickly because it's the best story about this teacher that I have. I went to college I started college in 1989, which was the year of the Loma Prieta earthquake, which was disastrous in the Bay Area. And so class was canceled for a week, and then the week later, my teacher was like, she was just like a fresh out of women's studies in 1989
Yes.
moment, and she says, "Oh my God, that when the Loma Prieta earthquake was happening, I was using my vibrator," and then we were like, "Oh,
Wow.
like what?" Like it was just like this, this kind of, just like
Yeah. No one had ever said that out
no
loud.
one had ever said out aloud anywhere, and it was just like I was like, okay, I want that. Like I want to be able to like be in a room and just be like okay
Yeah.
with talking about anything,
Right.
because so much of what I felt was also, I mean, I grew up Catholic, was bound up in shame. So while I want the things that I wanted in the world were not feminine and not Catholic. So a part of my experience in college was like, oh, I don't need that, and I don't need that, and
Casting
I don't need
off.
that. Yeah,
Would you read a poem called When God Was a Woman?
sure, I love that poem.
Tab number 11.
Yeah. So this one is also, is it in, let's see.
This book.
Okay. So this one, another formative teacher I had was a teacher named Mira Zussman, and she taught a Western religions class, but she taught a book called When God Was a Woman, which was, again, a game changer for me, and I thought, I always thought, I'm going to write a poem called When God Was a Woman, and this was finally, after 10 years, this is what I wrote. When God Was a Woman. When God was a woman, empire was meh. When God was a woman, we built schools of listening, and every week we sat quietly until we could hear each other's thoughts. No shadows when God was a woman. Little girls had great dominion, and grandmothers were venerated. Sky was the giant bellows of her inside. The grace of God meant flowing and willowy. This was when God was a woman. She played harmless pranks because she liked keeping things light. She made it rain on our collective good hair days. When she met someone who seemed fun and a little mysterious, she invited him into heaven. Then she made her daughter blind for a week, which in retrospect was kind of mean, but her daughter made the best of it.
It's playful, but it's also a pretty profound expression of feminist theology and what it would mean to reconceive the nature of God in a way that was female. But that ending is troubling.
Yeah.
I saw it in context of other poems you wrote about beauty and getting over this obsession with physical attractiveness. Is that the blessing that God gives that blind girl? Or am
I think my intention was to think, when I have this fantasy project that I want to do, that's like an archive of books that would document like a post-patriarchy age. But one of the things that I'm interested in is that it's not all ideal and utopian. If it was post-patriarchy, then we would have a matriarchy, which is also a kind of power relation. So I wanted to think about, like, you can't just idealize the notion of God being a woman, because it's still God. It still has that effect of being able to act indiscriminately.
Right.
My sense of the indiscriminate part, I'm also thinking about the kinds of sacrifices described in the Bible. The fact that she made the best of it was that, like, this is just part of it, as opposed to this being this kind of huge reaction that ends in, that leads to transformation, or leads to, the kind of soul searching that's about acquiescing to God, but rather like, okay, I'm blind maybe for now.
Right.
It's all good. I'll figure it out.
The way
Yeah.
one does.
The way one does,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. The new novel last year, The Power, dealt with that. The power genders are reversed and throughout the world, and the women start to commit horrible crimes too.
Sure,
They're
absolutely,
just female
yeah.
crimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. In a very witty way, you connect writing poems with certain physical conditions of your body. You say, for instance, to write a poem, I mustn't be wearing a bra.
Truth.
I liked my poetry to smell like I'd forgotten to wear deodorant.
Yep.
I'm assuming these are at least metaphorical. As much metaphorical as they are literal. How's that?
Yeah, yeah.
Would you read a poem called Dear Medusa?
Yes.
It's number 12.
In Milk and Filth. Is it in Milk and Filth? No, it's in Crow Futures, yeah.
This wonderful little book from City Lights out in San Francisco.
Yeah, this came out last year. So in Milk and Filth, the first section is something called gender fables, in which I'm taking kind of unrecuperable or kind of problematic figures that were important to me, like Joan Rivers. I was obsessed with her. And so this is kind of like a B-side that didn't end up in this book. It's called Dear Medusa. What was it like to be left with only a stone husband, stone postman, stone apprentice? Was it loneliness? A miracle? You had enormous power, which people called a curse, but it made you one of the first witches. See, I feel penetrated, and I want to survive my story. I want to be both vegan and Teflon, Ms. Medusa. Despite being cursed, weren't your days the wind lifting swirls of dust around your feet like an omen cat? Your deflection cushioned you with 100 husks. I want no window into me, not even pores. I write you because they want to bury my feet deep into the earth to be loam like that first myth, so your vilification seems like freedom. I'll end by thanking you for your gift to pre-feminism. You are truly one of my heroes. In praise of your impiety and the hiss of your brink, I write as your loyal and devoted disciple. Amen, hallelujah, and so on.
Nice, very, very witty. You're doing the kind of thing Madeline Miller does in Circe, this novel where she takes the witch in the Odyssey and reimagines her as,
Yes.
As a heroine instead
Yes.
of, yes. Anger in women is not a negative emotion, one of your poems. As I said when I met you, that I didn't think you thought anger was a problem. I really find your expression and your exploration of anger in your poetry incredibly refreshing. In one short poem, you write that you've inherited only 30% of your father's wrath. I'm left with a desire to be as hard as a monster. In another, you say the best enemy against antagonism is more howl, not less whisper. That could go on a t-shirt, by the way, and do very well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll send it to Bernie.
You push back. You push back hard against repression and impossible standards of beauty and feminism. I wonder if you'd read a poem called Sometimes There's a Virgin.
Yeah,
15.
that's in the city.
It's always in the book you
The
don't have.
city I was, yeah. Yeah, this book was a formative book for me, and it's kind of weirdly one of my favorite. I mean, it's not my favorite child, but it's definitely one I appreciate. Sometimes there's a virgin. Sometimes there's a virgin in the room. You make way for her light. She is fountainhead. When the virgin is in the room, she's robed by dim wattage. Virgin, remind me. When the virgin is in the room, our skirts feel tardy when there's a virgin in the room. The virgin has clean hair and there's nothing under her fingernails. She drinks water from the same cup all night long. She writes her name on the cup. The virgin writes lyric poetry about roads and wars and the crown of trees, but has a degree in something outside the arts because artists aren't virgins. Everyone talks to her and she doesn't even have mascara on. Her eyelashes are naturally thick. I brush past her to feel virginity. There's a big difference between virgin and non-virgin aura-wise. Someone drives her home before 11 o'clock. The virgin has a long driveway at her house. A parent waits for her. The virgin leaves her vibe behind, so we wait for it to dissipate. Then we get nasty and high, since the virgin made us feel bad because we gave it up in high school. That's just her course. It's not our fault.
I did not detect a lot of responses to Catholicism in your poems, but clearly that one, both the, but but of course, you're doing two things at once there, talking about the Virgin Mary, and then the way that idealization of that figure, creates a certain culture for young women that is oppressive and makes them feel slutty and bad, and the way they push back against that, the way your poem pushes back through wit and satire. Am I very close?
I think too, I was speaking to, there's a kind of aesthetic critique, right, that talks about being dirty for poetry as opposed to having this kind of austere sense of like the canonical, and not imagining that poetry is a substance. And it's sticky and it's dirty. You can't put it in a cup.
Right. In one of your earliest poems, you write, "Make something true before you go." That's such a lovely way to live one's life.
Yeah.
You've certainly done that. I wonder if you'd close by reading my favorite poem, Entanglement.
Entitlement. Okay, so that's
18.
okay, entitlement. Entanglement?
Entanglement.
Oh, okay. I thought you said I was like, do I have a poem called Entitlement? Oh, wow, that's cool. Don't remember writing that one. Okay, entanglement. We love what's best in our beloved, what's worse in them. You have to like what time does. Each day I talk to the part of me that is my beloved from a tiny telephone in me. I communicate in the clicks and beeps of our abbreviated tongue. Love is a long trial, a wending, and an uneven effort. I hate the word faith, but that's all there is. Only the last one standing knows the score. Think of the types of violence on a continuum, and toward the mildest end is love. I'm torn by you, I scream when my beloved pulls at our bond. I'm an alien host, or we are two yous subsumed by a single body. The beloved says, you changed my brain, and I am at that mercy, which is meant as a warranty for longevity, but there is no real promise. You keep knowing each other and knowing each other.
It's so lovely and so true.
Thank you.
I had such a great time talking to you tonight.
Yeah,
thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank
really,
you so
really
much.
appreciate it.
Yeah.